Never-before-seen footage of Sean Diddy Combs in the days leading up to his arrest in New York last September.
You want to put the stuff in my fanny pack, King?
The exclusive video obtained by Netflix shows Combs debating with his lawyers about strategy.
Listen to me. I'm going to get off the phone right now, and I am going to let you professionals look at the situation and come back to me with a solution. No matter what, no matter what nobody said. Let's just, here and there, y'all are not working together the right way. We're losing.
There are two kinds of footage celebrities never want you to see. The first is what happens when the cameras are off. The second is what happens when they forget the cameras are on. And somehow this footage sits right in the middle, because for a man who spent decades perfecting his image, curating his presence, and controlling how the world saw him, letting this much of himself be filmed was either a massive mistake or something far more revealing. What makes this footage unsettling isn't what's being said, it's how comfortable he looks saying it. And once you notice that, everything else starts to unravel. But this moment didn't come out of nowhere. For years, Sean Combs wasn't just a musician or an executive. He was a brand, a symbol, a presence. Every appearance felt deliberate. Every interview felt rehearsed. Every public moment felt engineered to reinforce the same idea: control. That's why this footage hits differently. Here's a man sitting with his lawyers, not on stage, not at an award show, not behind a microphone, but in a private moment that was never meant to feel private. And yet, he's still performing. He talks strategy, he interrupts, he redirects, he insists on being heard, not because he lacks legal advice, but because losing control isn't something he's wired to accept. There's a tension in his voice, not fear, not confusion, impatience. It's the impatience of someone who believes outcomes can still be managed if the right levers are pulled. And that's the first crack, because when someone who's always won starts realizing they might not, the instinct isn't reflection, it's resistance. But what happened next revealed even more. Later, the footage follows him into Harlem, out among fans, smiling, shaking hands, accepting hugs. On the surface, it looks like another routine public interaction, a familiar scene for someone who's lived most of his life in the spotlight. But once it ends, the tone shifts immediately.
I need some hand sanitizer. Hold on. I got it. I've been out in the streets amongst the people. Yeah, I gotta take a bath. Like the amount of people that actually I'm coming in contact with, like that's what I have to do. You know what I'm saying? Oh. It's like 150 hugs.
He pulls away, mentions sanitizer, talks about needing to wash, talks about feeling dirty, not metaphorically, physically. And that's when people stop watching casually, because this wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't even frustration. It was distance. The kind of distance you don't hear when someone's on. The kind you hear when the mask drops for just a second too long. What unsettled viewers wasn't arrogance, it was detachment. And once you notice that detachment, it's impossible to unsee it everywhere else, especially when the story widens. When the reckoning was announced, reactions were immediate and divided. Some called it overdue, others called it biased. Some dismissed it as personal beef dressed up as storytelling. But what made the series impossible to ignore wasn't the accusations, it was the access. This wasn't just commentary, it was perspective, multiple voices, conflicting interpretations, people who didn't agree on what they saw, but saw it anyway. One of the most controversial elements was the involvement of 50 Cent, whose history with Combs instantly made people question motive. Was this about truth or tension? The documentary didn't answer that directly. Instead, it did something more dangerous. It let the footage speak. And that footage didn't need narration to feel uncomfortable, because power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks casual, but the most complicated part of the story didn't come from the screen. It came from the courtroom. After the trial, two jurors spoke publicly for the first time, and what they said left people stunned. Not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. The verdict itself was already mixed. Some charges stuck, others didn't. But the explanations revealed something deeper. One juror described the relationship at the center of the case as two people in love. Another pointed out that certain actions weren't part of the formal charges, and just like that, the conversation shifted. Because legality and morality don't always overlap, and the absence of a charge doesn't equal the absence of harm. When Cassie entered the picture, the details became harder to dismiss. The age difference, the imbalance, the timing, not all at once, but over time. And that's what made it complicated, because conditioning doesn't look dramatic in real time. It looks normal until it doesn't. One juror acknowledged that outright, saying that when someone enters a dynamic young, they don't realize what's happening until years later. That statement alone reframed the entire case, and it raised a question no verdict could fully answer. Who gets the benefit of the doubt, and why? Because when someone holds wealth, influence, and cultural weight, doubt doesn't disappear. It gets redirected. Every action gets filtered through success. Every behavior gets reframed through legacy. Every accusation gets weighed against reputation. And reputation is powerful. It buys silence. It buys hesitation. It buys patience where others get judgment. That doesn't mean everyone involved made the wrong call, but it does mean the system doesn't treat everyone the same. And when jurors themselves admit that certain behaviors weren't on trial, only specific charges were, it becomes clear how narrow justice can be, which leads to the most uncomfortable question of all. Was this ever just about one man? Some argued the trial put hip hop culture on trial, that the scrutiny was unfair, that the spotlight was selective. But silence has weight too. When nobody speaks, the absence becomes its own message. Not approval, but avoidance. And avoidance doesn't protect culture, it protects individuals. The documentary doesn't accuse hip hop, it challenges it by asking who speaks when power misbehaves and who stays quiet when speaking costs too much. That's why the series hit nerves it never named, because it didn't demand answers. It exposed the lack of them. And if Sean Combs ever watches it back, he might call it well made. He might respect the production. He might even admire parts of it, because from his perspective, the story still includes him at the center. But the truth doesn't need approval, and power doesn't vanish when it's questioned. It just loses control of the narrative. That footage didn't ruin an image, it revealed one. And once people see the difference, they don't forget it. Stories like this don't stop when the cameras turn off. They just get quieter. And when the next piece surfaces, most people won't even notice unless they're paying attention. So, if you want to stay updated on the juiciest celebrity stories, the ones nobody breaks down like this, hit like so more people see it, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because the biggest stories usually aren't the loudest ones.